My name is Althea. I'm 32, and on the way to my grandfather's while reading, a homeless man stopped me in the middle of the road. He leaned close and whispered, "Don't go there." Then he said something that shook me to my core. He left it all to me. I'm his son. From that moment, nothing felt the same. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more family drama and emotional courage stories. I never thought a simple drive to my grandfather's while reading would turn into the kind of memory that still makes my hands tremble on the steering wheel. That morning started like any other, but within minutes I realized nothing about that day would ever be ordinary again. The September sky hung heavy, with gray clouds, as I pulled out of my driveway, the kind that promised rain, but held off just long enough to make you second-guess bringing an umbrella. My old Honda made its usual groans as I steered onto Main Street. I remember glancing at the empty coffee cup in the console, debating whether I should have stopped for a refill. I figured I'd need the caffeine to face my relatives, because whenever my family gathered in one room, it wasn't warmth or laughter that filled the air, it was tension. Grandpa had been the glue of the family, but when he passed, the cracks widened fast. Old arguments bubbled back up. Everyone wanted something: land, money, recognition. I was already bracing myself for the storm of fake smiles and whispered grudges when something unusual broke my thoughts. At the red light near the old gas station, a man stepped off the curb. He was tall but hunched, wrapped in a faded army jacket several sizes too big, with a torn baseball cap pulled low. His beard was unkempt, his eyes shadowed, but there was a sharpness in them that startled me. Most people crossed their arms or looked away when they saw someone homeless approaching, but I froze, my hand still on the steering wheel, the other hovering near the window switch. He stopped right in front of my car, his hand, rough and weathered, pressed against the hood as if to steady himself, or maybe to stop me from pulling forward. My heart jumped. I cracked the window just an inch, planning to tell him I had no change. But he didn't ask for money. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice low but urgent, each word heavy enough to cut through the hum of traffic. "Don't go there. Don't go to the will reading." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What?" I asked, my voice coming out thinner than I expected. His eyes met mine, piercing, almost pleading. He left it all to me. I'm his son. The words landed like stones in my chest. My grandfather's son? That made no sense. Grandpa had 2 children, my father and my aunt. Everyone in town knew that. Who was this man? The light turned green. Cars behind me honked. I startled, fumbling to shift into drive, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me as though he'd just handed me a piece of a puzzle I didn't know existed. Finally, I eased forward, giving him space, and he stepped back onto the sidewalk. By the time I turned the corner, my pulse was racing faster than the car. The rest of the drive blurred. I remember glancing at the rear-view mirror again and again, half expecting him to follow me. My chest felt tight, like his words had burrowed under my skin and refused to leave. Why me? Why stop me out of everyone in the family? Did he know who I was? Had he been waiting for me? I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he was just another drifter, saying whatever came to mind, weaving stories out of thin air. But the way he looked at me, it didn't feel random. It felt personal. Memories of Grandpa flickered in my mind. His sharp blue eyes, the way he'd sit on the porch, silent but steady, the way he used to grip my shoulder whenever I was nervous, reminding me I was stronger than I thought. Could a man like that really have a secret child? Could he have abandoned someone and never spoken of it? I shook my head, trying to push the thought away, but curiosity gnawed at me. As I turned onto Maple Avenue, The road narrowed, lined with houses I'd known since childhood. My elementary school was still there, though the playground had rusted and the swings hung crooked. I passed the diner, where Grandpa used to take me for pancakes on Sunday mornings. Every memory felt sharper now, colored by the possibility that maybe I didn't know him as well as I thought. The closer I got to the lawyer's office, the heavier the silence in the car felt. I rolled down the window, hoping the cool air would calm me, but it didn't. My chest still thudded with nervous energy. I even considered pulling over just to catch my breath. Then something strange happened. As I slowed at another intersection, I spotted him again. The same man, just a block away from where I'd seen him before, sitting on the edge of a bench outside a shuttered storefront. His eyes locked on me instantly, like he'd been waiting. He didn't move this time, didn't approach, but he lifted his hand slightly, almost like a wave, or maybe a warning. I gripped the wheel and drove past, pretending not to see him, but my heart sank deeper. If he made it there, before me, once, could he show up at the Will reading too? The idea unsettled me. By the time I reached the small brick building where the lawyer's office sat, I was a mess of nerves. I parked crooked, had to back up and straighten, which only made my hands shake worse. I sat there with the engine running, staring at the glass door with the painted letters, Law Offices of Harold Whitmore. I knew my relatives would already be inside, waiting, exchanging thin smiles and pretending they weren't ready to tear each other apart. And here I was, sitting in the car, haunted by the words of a stranger who claimed to be my grandfather's son. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let out a shaky breath. His voice echoed again in my mind. Don't go there. Don't go to the Will reading. For a moment, I wondered if I should listen. What if he knew something I didn't? What if stepping into that room meant stepping into a trap I couldn't escape? But another part of me, the stubborn, practical part, kicked in. I had every right to be there. I wasn't going to let a stranger scare me away from finding out what my grandfather had left behind, whether it was property, money, or just words on a page. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that my day had already taken a turn I'd never come back from. I cut the engine, grabbed my purse, and stepped out of the car. The air smelled like rain was coming. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked toward the door. My reflection in the glass looked pale, uncertain, and just before I reached for the handle, I turned, half expecting to see him again. The sidewalk was empty, but the unease stayed. I stood there for a moment, staring at the gold letters painted across the glass door, Law Offices of Harold Whitmore. The hallway behind me was empty, the faint hum of the old fluorescent light above buzzing like a nervous heartbeat. My reflection in the glass looked pale and uncertain, but there was no time to hesitate. I pulled the handle, stepped inside, and the soft chime of a bell above the door announced my arrival. The air inside was different, too warm, stale with the faint mix of old carpet, polished wood, and burnt coffee, the kind of smell that clings to offices where people come to argue about things left behind. My heels clicked softly against the linoleum as I walked toward the reception desk. A young assistant with round glasses looked up, gave me a polite nod, and whispered, "They're waiting in the conference room." My stomach tightened. They're waiting. Not your family or the others, just they. That small choice of words reminded me exactly what I was walking into. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The room stretched long and narrow, with a polished oak table running nearly its full length. Thick curtains blocked most of the daylight, leaving only the dull glow of a chandelier overhead. Around the table sat faces I knew too well, though none of them looked happy to see me. "Althea," my aunt murmured, her voice carrying the kind of false sweetness you only use when you're pretending. She was dressed sharply in navy, her hair pinned back, so tightly it almost pulled at her features. She gestured vaguely at an empty chair near the end, as though she was doing me a favor. My uncle, seated beside her, didn't bother with a greeting. He leaned back in his chair, one arm stretched over the backrest, the other drumming impatient fingers against the table. His eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away, like I was just another annoyance in a day already filled with too many. Across from them sat my cousin Rebecca, tapping furiously on her phone. She didn't look up, but I caught the quick roll of her eyes when she realized I'd noticed her. Next to her, her brother Daniel shifted in his seat, offering me a tight, polite smile that looked more like a grimace. I slid into the chair, my palms damp against the smooth wood of the armrests. Nobody asked how I was. Nobody mentioned Grandpa. The silence pressed down heavy, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock on the far wall. Finally, the door opened again, and Mr. Whitmore, the lawyer, entered. He was tall, his suit neat but dated, his tie slightly crooked as though he'd rushed to put it on. He carried a leather folder tucked under one arm and set it carefully on the table before clearing his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice even but weary, like a man who had repeated this line too many times in too many rooms. Before he could continue, my uncle leaned forward. "Let's just get on with it. Harold, no speeches, no stories. We all know why we're here." My aunt nodded, her lips pressed into a thin smile. "Yes, please. We don't need the dramatics." The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his eyes flicking toward me briefly before returning to the folder. It was a small glance, but it unsettled me. Did he know something? Or was I just projecting the stranger's words onto everything now? As he began arranging papers, the tension in the room thickened. My cousin Rebecca finally set her phone aside, folding her arms and leaning back with a huff. "I hope this doesn't take forever. I have a meeting later." "Really, Rebecca?" I muttered before I could stop myself. Her head snapped toward me, her eyebrows raised high. "What?" She shot back, her tone sharp. "Not everyone can spend their mornings lounging around." "Enough," my uncle barked, his voice slicing through the room like a blade. "We're not here to bicker." He turned toward the lawyer again. "Go on." Mr. Whitmore hesitated, flipping open the folder, but before he could speak, another voice broke in. "Interesting how eager you are, Thomas," Daniel said quietly, leaning back in his chair. His calm tone made it sting sharper, almost like you already know what's coming. My uncle's head whipped toward his son. "Don't start, Danny." His fingers drummed harder against the table, faster now, betraying a rhythm of nerves. The lawyer cleared his throat again, louder this time, and the room reluctantly fell silent. "Your father's instructions were clear," he said carefully. "But before I begin, I want to remind you all that these proceedings require patience and respect." My aunt's scoff was barely audible, but it was there. I sat still, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Every word, every glance felt like sparks waiting to catch. I thought of Grandpa, how he used to keep us all in line with a single look. Without him, this table felt more like a battleground than a family gathering. The lawyer reached for the envelope, the paper crinkling faintly as he prepared to read. But just then, the door behind us creaked open. All heads turned. It was the receptionist again, her expression apologetic. "Sorry, Mr. Whitmore," she said softly. "There's someone outside insisting on coming in." My aunt groaned, massaging her temples. "We don't need interruptions." "Who?" my uncle demanded. The receptionist shifted uncomfortably. "He says he has a right to be here." A heavy silence fell across the room. My pulse quickened. Without meaning to, my eyes darted toward the door, half expecting to see a familiar shadow. The lawyer frowned, glancing at us before addressing the receptionist. "We'll handle it. Please ask him to wait." The door closed again, leaving behind a silence so sharp I could hear my own breath. My uncle muttered something under his breath, too low to catch, but the edge in his voice carried. My aunt leaned closer to him, whispering quickly, their words muffled but tense. Rebecca snatched up her phone again, her fingers flying across the screen, probably already texting someone about the disruption. I sat frozen. Was it him? The man from the street? The thought clawed at me, but I forced myself to stay still, to keep my face blank. Nobody else seemed to suspect. To them, it was just another delay in a process already dragging too long. But to me, it was the confirmation of a fear I hadn't yet put into words. The lawyer straightened, smoothing his tie, and forced a thin smile. "Let's continue," he said firmly, though his eyes flickered toward the door once more. As he began to read, my family leaned forward, their faces lit with greed, suspicion, and hunger for what they thought was owed to them. I tried to listen, I really did, but my mind kept drifting back to the stranger's words. "Don't go there. He left it all to me. I'm his son." And now, as the lawyer's voice droned on, my heart pounded with the certainty that those words weren't random. They were a storm waiting just outside the door, ready to break this room wide open. The sound of chairs scraping across the polished wooden floor still rang in my ears when the front doors creaked open. Everyone turned their heads at once, the heavy silence wrapping around us like a blanket too tight to breathe in. There he was, the same homeless man who had stopped me on the road. His clothes still hung loose and worn, but his eyes, sharp, steady, almost defiant, cut across the room like a blade. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining him, that the tension of the will reading had shaken me so much I had conjured him into existence. But no, he stood there, real as the golden chandelier hanging above our heads. Gasps filled the room. My Aunt Patricia's glass slipped from her hand, shattering into tiny shards on the marble floor. My cousin Daniel muttered under his breath, "What in the world?" And my mother froze, her face pale as paper. I wanted to shrink back, to disappear into the chair, but his eyes found mine instantly. They lingered, as though we had some unfinished business, as though his warning had been just the first page of a book, only he knew the ending of. "Who let him in here?" Uncle Robert barked, his voice sharp, the kind that made people sit straighter in their seats. "This is private family business." But the homeless man didn't flinch. He stepped forward, slow, steady, as though every eye in the room wasn't trying to pierce right through him. "This is my family business, too," he said, his voice low but strong. The room went still. For a long second, I could hear nothing but the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. "What did you just say?" Patricia's voice shook, half outrage, half disbelief. The man's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like a challenge. "I am Harold's son, just as much a child of his as any of you sitting here." The words hit like a thunderclap. My heart lurched, my hands gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. "Impossible," Robert spat. "My father had no other children. Everyone knows that." The man didn't back down. "He had me. He just didn't raise me." The air thickened, heavy with unspoken questions, with old suspicions some might have buried deep but never truly erased. I looked at my mother. Her eyes shimmered with something I couldn't read. Fear? Recognition? Regret? Before anyone could react further, the lawyer, Mr. Sanders, cleared his throat. His usually calm, orderly tone now carried unease. Perhaps we should allow him to explain. Robert slammed his fist against the table. "No, this is outrageous. He's a stranger. He's here to make trouble." But the man's voice cut through Robert's anger like a steady knife. "You can call me Thomas, and I can prove who I am." My chest tightened. That name, Thomas, it struck a faint chord in me. Somewhere in the corners of childhood memories, half-forgotten stories, whispered arguments late at night, I had heard that name. You've got some nerve walking in here dressed like that, claiming to be one of us, Patricia sneered, regaining her composure. Why should we believe you? Thomas reached into his worn jacket. My pulse raced. For a second, the entire room seemed to lean forward, tense, waiting. He pulled out a faded envelope, its edges frayed with age, and placed it carefully on the polished table. This, he said, his voice unwavering, was written by Harold himself. To me, years ago. Gasps again. The lawyer gingerly picked it up, inspecting the handwriting. His brows furrowed. This does appear to be authentic. Robert shot out of his chair. Forged, obviously forged. But as the lawyer unfolded the letter and began reading aloud, the room shifted. Harold's handwriting was clear, his words undeniable. To my son, Thomas, though I was not the father you deserved, you are still my blood. One day, when the time comes, the truth will find its way back to the family. Be patient. They will know. The letter trembled in the lawyer's hands as he finished. I couldn't breathe. My grandfather, stern, distant, powerful Harold, had written these words, had carried this secret all his life. Lies. Robert barked again, his voice cracking this time. This is a trick. My father would never. Stop, my mother said quietly. It was the first word she had spoken since Thomas entered. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through Robert's rage like a bell. Everyone turned to her. Her eyes glistened as she looked at Thomas. Her lips trembled, as if words she had been holding back for decades were finally clawing their way out. I know who you are, she said. My stomach dropped. You what? Patricia screeched. My mother's gaze didn't waver. I knew about him. Harold told me once, but he swore me to silence, said the family couldn't handle the truth. The room erupted in chaos, voices overlapping, accusations flying, disbelief crashing against anger. Daniel demanded to know if this meant Thomas had a claim to the inheritance. Patricia cried out that it was all a plot to steal what was rightfully hers. But all I could do was stare at Thomas, my mind spinning. He had warned me on the road. He had tried to stop me from coming here. And now, he stood in front of all of us, tearing apart the foundation of everything we thought we knew. He met my eyes again. For a moment, the noise of the room faded. It was just him and me, bound together by a secret too big to ignore. Then he spoke, louder this time, his voice carrying authority I hadn't expected. I don't want your fortune. I don't want your houses or your land. I came here for one reason, so that Harold's truth would not be buried with him. The lawyer's hand trembled slightly as he folded the letter. This changes everything, he murmured. I could feel my heart pounding, my mind racing, the weight of what had just unfolded pressing down on me. This gathering had begun as a simple reading of a will. Now it was something else entirely, a battlefield of truth and lies, of family and betrayal. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The lawyer's words, "This changes everything," still hung in the air like a storm cloud, refusing to move on. Nobody sat back down. The air smelled faintly of Patricia's spilled wine, sharp and sour, and the shattered glass on the floor glimmered under the chandelier like pieces of a broken truth. I couldn't pull my eyes from Thomas. His posture was strong, but I could see the exhaustion in the way his shoulders sagged. He wasn't bluffing, and deep down, every one of us knew it. Enough of this madness. Robert growled. His voice shook with anger, but beneath it, I heard something else, fear. I demand we end this charade and continue with the will. But Mr. Sanders, the lawyer, shook his head slowly. We can't proceed until this matter is clarified. Harold anticipated something like this. He reached into his worn leather briefcase and pulled out a second envelope, sealed with the same wax crest I had seen earlier. The room went still again. "What is that?" Patricia whispered, her voice thin as a thread. The lawyer's hand trembled slightly as he held it up. "It's marked private, for family only. Harold instructed that it be opened only if certain questions arose." My throat tightened. Questions? What questions? How much had my grandfather hidden from us all? Mr. Sanders broke the seal with careful fingers. He unfolded the letter, cleared his throat, and began to read. "If you are hearing this, then the truth I carried has finally caught up with me. I was not the man you believed me to be. My life before you, before this house and this family, was built on choices I rarely spoke of, choices that left scars. Every word pressed into my chest like a weight. My mother lowered her eyes. Patricia clutched her pearls so tightly I thought they'd snap. The lawyer continued, his voice heavy with each line. "Before I married your grandmother, I loved another woman. Her name was Evelyn. She was kind, gentle, and braver than I ever was. We had a son together, Thomas, but fear and duty pulled me away. I turned my back on them, convincing myself I was protecting everyone. In truth, I was protecting my own ambition. I built my empire while they struggled without me, and I carried that shame until the end. I felt a sharp sting in my chest. My grandfather, the man who always preached responsibility and strength, had abandoned his first family? The letter didn't stop. I know you will feel anger, betrayal, perhaps disgust. But Thomas is my blood, no matter how I failed him. If he has found his way to you, now it is because fate has decided the truth can no longer stay buried." The lawyer's voice faltered as he folded the letter and placed it gently on the table. Silence thundered in its place. My cousin Daniel was the first to speak. "So it's true? He really is our uncle." His voice cracked on the last word, as if it tasted strange in his mouth. "No," Robert barked. "This doesn't prove anything. A letter, words on paper. He could have written that to anyone." But my mother raised her head. Her eyes were wet, her voice quiet but steady. "I remember Evelyn. I met her once. Father brought her to the house before I was old enough to understand. He introduced her as a family friend. But the way he looked at her, I knew she was more than that." Patricia gasped. "And you never said anything?" "He swore me to silence." My mother whispered. "I was a child. What was I supposed to do?" The argument erupted again, voices clashing, each family member clinging to the version of Harold they wanted to believe. But I wasn't listening to them anymore. I was staring at Thomas. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't smug. They were just sad. He finally spoke, his voice low. "I didn't come here to destroy you. I came because I couldn't carry his silence anymore. My mother, Evelyn, she died years ago, never forgiving him. But she told me to try, to give you the chance to know the truth before it was too late." His words hit me harder than the letter. This wasn't about money or inheritance. It was about recognition, about a son finally daring to step into the light after living in the shadow of someone else's life. Still, Robert wasn't ready to let go. He pushed his chair back violently, the legs screeching across the floor. "This is a scam. Some washed-up drifter found an old letter and decided to claim a piece of the pie. Well, not on my watch." Thomas's jaw tightened. For the first time, anger sparked in his eyes. "You think I want your pie? Do you know what it's like to grow up wondering why your father didn't want you? To see his face on magazines, hear about his fortune while you're sleeping under bridges? I'm not here for your crumbs. I'm here because he wanted you to know who I am." The rawness in his voice silenced even Robert. For a moment, Nobody spoke. Then, slowly, Mr. Sanders cleared his throat again. There is more. Everyone turned to him. What do you mean more? Patricia asked, her voice quivering. The lawyer reached back into the envelope and pulled out a smaller slip of paper. It appears Harold left a confession about certain decisions he made in business and in his personal life. He wanted you to understand the cost of his success. As he read, more secrets poured out. Land deals that had pushed families from their homes. Friendships destroyed by ambition. Promises broken in silence. The image of Harold as a proud, unshakable patriarch cracked with every sentence. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt, the chandelier swinging above like it might come crashing down at any moment. My whole life, I had looked at my grandfather as a pillar of strength, even if he was distant. Now I saw him differently, not a pillar, but a man who had built walls around his mistakes. Daniel sank into a chair, his face pale. All this time, we thought he was perfect, and he was just human. Flawed. Maybe worse. No, Patricia snapped, though her voice shook. We can't let this ruin his legacy. But my mother whispered, maybe the truth is his legacy. Her words echoed in my head. I looked at Thomas again, the outsider, the hidden son, and I realized the story wasn't just about Harold's mistakes. It was about us, the family left behind to deal with the cracks in his foundation. The gathering that was supposed to divide wealth had turned into something else entirely, a reckoning. And deep inside, I knew that reckoning was only just beginning. The silence after the last word of my grandfather's confession was deafening. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed hesitant, as though it didn't want to break the moment. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the letter on the table, its edges trembling from the ceiling fan above. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Robert slammed his hand flat against the table. The sound cracked through the room, like thunder. We're not accepting this. His face was crimson, his jaw rigid. I don't care what Harold wrote. That man, he pointed a trembling finger at Thomas, is not one of us, and he's not taking what belongs to this family. Patricia, who had been dabbing her eyes with a tissue, found her voice again. Robert's right. Father may have made mistakes, but he never intended for him to benefit from everything we worked for. We stood by Harold. We suffered his temper, his distance, his demands. He didn't. He wasn't there. Thomas didn't flinch. He stood calmly, his shoulders squared, though his voice was steady with pain. I wasn't there. You think I chose that? You think I wanted to live a life of absence. Your father shut the door on me before I even had a chance to knock. Their words sliced through me like shards of glass, each one cutting deeper. I could feel my mother's trembling hand brush against mine under the table. Althea, she whispered, almost too soft for anyone else to hear. Say something. But what could I say? I was caught between two realities, the family I had grown up with, and the truth that had just been placed, undeniable, before us. The lawyer cleared his throat. If I may, Harold's will clearly states, to all rightful heirs. He left no further definition. Legally, this matter is very much open to interpretation, but morally, his gaze swept the room, finally resting on me. Morally, that decision lies with you all. Every head turned toward me. I wasn't the eldest. I wasn't the wealthiest. I had no authority. Yet somehow, the weight of the moment pressed against my chest as if the decision were mine alone. Robert leaned forward, his voice hard. Althea, don't let this con artist twist your head. Blood or not, he's a stranger. And strangers don't inherit legacies. Thomas's eyes met mine. They weren't pleading. They weren't angry. They were searching for recognition. I'm not here to steal from you. He said softly, "I'm here to be acknowledged. For once in my life, I want to stop being the ghost your father left behind." My throat tightened. I thought of my grandfather's lectures about honesty, about duty, about strength, and I thought of the secret he carried hidden under all those words. I pushed back my chair, the screech echoing across the room. My legs felt shaky as I stood. I can't pretend I didn't hear that letter. I can't ignore what's sitting right in front of us. Patricia gasped. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said, surprising even myself with the firmness in my tone. "Thomas's family. Maybe not the kind we expected, maybe not the kind we wanted, but he is Harold's son, and that makes him blood." Robert's fist clenched. "So you betray us? Your own mother? Your cousins?" I turned to him, my heart pounding. "No, I'm refusing to betray the truth. There's a difference." The room erupted again, Patricia shouting about loyalty, Robert threatening lawyers and lawsuits, Daniel pacing with his hands buried in his hair. But through the chaos, I felt strangely clear. For the first time since the homeless man had stopped me on the road, I knew what I had to do. I walked to Thomas. Every step felt heavy, but right. I stopped just a foot away, my eyes level with his. "I believe you," I said, "and I'm not turning my back on you." The room went still again. My mother exhaled shakily, her voice cracking. "Then neither will I." She stood slowly, her hand trembling as she reached out and touched Thomas's arm. Robert swore under his breath and stormed out of the room, the door slamming so hard the chandelier rattled above us. Patricia sat frozen, her tissue crumpled in her fist, disbelief carved across her face. Daniel looked between us all, torn, then finally sank back into his chair, silent but no longer resistant. The lawyer cleared his throat again. "Then it seems the path forward has been chosen. Harold's wishes will be honored by those willing to accept them." As the paperwork shuffled and the arguments dulled into background noise, I felt a strange peace settle over me. Not joy, not victory, just peace. Because I had chosen truth over comfort, blood over denial, humanity over greed. When it was finally over, Thomas and I stepped outside together. The late afternoon sun had begun to dip, painting the sky with streaks of gold and red. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Thomas turned to me. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," I said, my voice soft. "Because if I didn't, I'd be no better than him, the man who turned his back on you in the first place." His eyes glistened, not tears of weakness, but of release. "Thank you." We walked down the steps together, the heavy wooden doors closing behind us. The others could cling to their bitterness, their denial, their greed. But I had made my choice. And in that choice, I found something I never expected. Not money, not power, not revenge. I found freedom. Freedom from the lies we told ourselves. Freedom from the weight of silence. Freedom to finally stand for something that mattered. My grandfather had left us wealth, yes, but more than that, he had left us a question. What do we value more, blood or truth? For me, the answer was clear. I chose both.